Right. We're live now. Some technical difficulties.
I'm just going to grab my charger so you can hear me all right.
Yep. Can't seem to get the Instagram hooked up right now. I don't know what's going on. But if not, we'll just have to do without it.
I'll check on my end.
Yeah, it's not going. I don't know why it's not working, but I'm running into all kinds of issues today. But
Which means we got to make it even better sourcing.
yeah, so I mean, if anybody's just joining, if you're watching on YouTube, just hit that like button. Definitely helps the videos out. If you guys are joining here on Twitter, welcome. YouTube, Instagram is not going to be going, but today we're going to cover, as people start joining, we're going to cover our usual sourcing. We're going to find a brand, identify a brand, what makes that a qualifying brand, and then we're going to get into as to how we would pitch that brand based on the different parameters or things that we're seeing with the listings on Amazon. So, and anybody watching this back on YouTube, obviously, you could fast forward and rewind throughout the video, but I want to just touch on before we jump into the sourcing side of this, right? I posted a reel yesterday about how we did some serious numbers on Prime Day. And, we ended up finishing the day over 50,000 in sales, which is crazy to even say, but it's all a byproduct of planning, and it's really all a byproduct of three main components, which is what I had mentioned in the reel. So anybody looking to grow their business, it really comes down to, obviously, you have to be sourcing the suppliers, you have to be contacting the suppliers, but there's really three main methods. And if anybody's joining and has, questions or comments, just drop a comment in, let us know you're here. Ask any questions you guys need to. But essentially, three ways to grow the business. The way I see it is one, you have, actually acquiring more inventory. You need more SKUs in your inventory in order to grow. You also need to increase the average selling price that you're selling those products for, right? So we see businesses all the time that are running, at average selling prices of like $10. Maybe they're moving tens of thousands of units through their warehouse. And yes, that's one way to grow, but you can actually grow a lot quicker without laying a whole lot less labor and work by simply increasing the average price that you're selling your products for. And I'm not talking about going up from 10 to 20. I'm talking about going from 10 to 100, right? I mean, that's been a serious scaling factor for our business over the past year, 2 years. Second thing is buying, right? Your buying decisions, whether you're making the buying decisions, you have a buying team, buying needs to be absolutely 100% on point. And that comes down to reading Keepa, and it comes down to placing test orders. Did you want to get into maybe a little bit about that and buying?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say we talk about it a lot, especially on Twitter, and everything like sales numbers are all byproduct of spend numbers. So we talk about inputs versus outputs a lot, and your outputs are your sales. Your inputs are the things like your weekly and monthly spend. Your how many suppliers you're calling per week, whatever it is. So control your inputs, and then your outputs kind of it lines up, right? Like you're not going to be calling, you're not going to be calling 10 suppliers a week and have it grow this massive business, right? So it's your inputs really affect what the output and the end result is. And it seems obvious, but like we don't think about that. We like to think about naturally, like, hey, I want my sales to be XYZ because that's what everybody wants. But in reality, the inputs are what's important to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if anybody can sell on Amazon, but it's a completely another thing to run a profitable business, right? We want to be doing massive sales numbers, but we want to be doing those numbers profitably, right? And the only way to ensure profitability in your Amazon business is buying. Like for years, we placed small, tiny orders, with our suppliers, really just to get a gauge and mitigate the risk, right? Because when you're just starting, you have limited capital. It's about risk mitigation. You don't want to, throw, if you have $5,000, you don't want to throw $4,900 into a product on a one-time buy before, you place a test order and just you end up losing money, right? It's a terrible use of capital. And so we
diversification, like in stocks, it's like diversify when you have less capital.
Exactly. I mean, the mindset, like when we first started, was it was literally like that. It was stocks. We went very wide. Obviously, as we grew, we went deeper as we gained more confidence, as we, started closing more accounts. But we go deep where it's appropriate, right? We're still holding a 30 to a 45-day supply, right? I mean, it's not like going deep means like making some crazy risk.
Yeah, definitely. And we always talk about, using the baseball analogy. It's like base hits win games, and so like you don't need to be swinging for the fences in terms of closing an exclusive or, trying to go super deep on a product because you think it's a good opportunity and you think you're never going to get that opportunity again, because it's like everything else, you will always get another opportunity. There will always be another opportunity. But if you go based on your feelings and go based on how the buy box looks right now and go based on, not data-driven decisions and not enough experience, you're just going to get yourself into a bad position. And then you're going to be strung out on capital, sell the product at a loss. And, you're not going to have gained anything other than hopefully the experience to say, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I mean, in terms of like, you got to be contacting brands, you got to be contacting, suppliers to find these brands, but you have to be making the right buys. You have to be adding SKUs. You have to be increasing your average selling price. And then the last thing that I talked about yesterday, which was you need to build a team, right? Maybe not on day one. It doesn't need to be a huge team, but I mean, we didn't sell 50,000 yesterday by ourselves, right? This is a byproduct of, a team operating our warehouse. We have members, and we've built out systems in place that has helped our business scale tremendously, right? Everyone from their virtual assistants in the Philippines to, our team members at our warehouse, and everybody involved is making the whole system operate and work, right? And if there's one loose screw or one loose end, a lot of times we'll see that in another area. If it's like, if it's a nuanced situation, right? And something isn't done correctly, it might trickle down and affect everything else. And that's very much so the way Amazon is, in that there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of logistics involved, and there's also really a lot of just one thing builds on the next.
Yeah, and a lot of the times you don't see, it's just like preparation. You don't see those mistakes and those faults that you make until weeks later. Because if you don't order now, your sales are still going to be great tomorrow. If you don't order from your supplier, sales are still going to be great the next day. But in 3 weeks, when you're out of stock and now you have a lead time of 2 weeks and to get the product into Amazon, and now you don't have sales for the next month. So, just because you're not seeing it it's going to catch up with you eventually if you're lapsing in something, especially ordering inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so why don't we jump in here for a couple minutes, see if we could find a brand. We're going to start in Smart Scout, and for anybody just joining or doesn't, join our lives weekly, exactly how we source is right inside these lives, so there's nothing special or crazy about our processes. It literally just becomes a matter of execution. We start in Smart Scout. We set a very basic filter to have a average revenue of at least 20,000. And for our purposes right here today, we're going to bring our top parameter down a little bit. We're going to go to 120,000 in monthly revenue. We're looking for at least 2 FBA sellers on the listing, and we're going to set this to 9, right? Because as we talked about before, there's a sweet spot in sell price under 10. So then we're just going to hit search, and we're going to populate a list of completely category agnostic brands. We don't source in specific categories. Rather, we prefer categories like this grocery gourmet food. And then we scroll, right? We scroll and look for niche brands, vendors that we can build a relationship with intimately with the owner, the operator, decision maker. And we're looking at these different parameters here and really just opening these things up in a new tab.
What is options? Oh, that's a subcategory. I was going to say, it's a textbook.
So it must be a book on options trading.
Yeah, I thought that was the primary category. I was going to say, the new thing. Amazon's getting into the stock market.
I'm sure they will probably at some point.
Yeah, it's on like they just came out with the pharmacy thing where it's like I haven't looked into it at all or seen it, but I know it's super cheap. It's like a couple bucks a month for like full on pharmacy care. But I feel like when you get so big like this, it's like economies of scale. I mean, they just like put out movies now, and it's taking over the world.
Yeah. So I clicked on this one because it was in, the grocery category. An average selling price over 20, doing 120,000 in monthly revenue. What's the brand score? So we look at the brand score. Score's pretty good. And Brandon, just so anybody, if they're watching, don't know what the brand score is, if you want to just reiterate what that is.
Yeah, brand score, it's a number out of 10, 1 through 10. Just developed and looked at by Smart Scout, and it's just taking into account if you were to rate something on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, in terms of the brand store, the A+ content, the pictures, the cohesiveness, all those things. So what that means for us, especially as brand direct wholesale sellers, is when we're contacting a brand to lower the brand score. And obviously we want to verify that on the Amazon page itself, just to see, do they have a cohesive brand presence? And if they don't, then that just adds more ammunition for us to be able to contact them and provide value. So generally the inverse relationship, where the lower the brand score is, the better it is in our eyes in terms of contacting them as a brand direct seller. If you're purchasing through distributors, it might not matter because you might not be trying to optimize listings and do things like that. But lower brand scores actually are better for our purposes. And we can kind of verify that by looking at the listing if that score is correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we keep scrolling here just to maybe see what we have. And, we look at like 32 sellers, right? We're seeing 5 sellers.
I mean, how's that one? Do you know that brand right there, that seasoning brand?
This one?
Yeah, I mean, 5.6 sellers, Amazon in stock rate 4%.
Looks like the brand is on it themselves.
So the brand is on there directly. So again,
there's also a couple other sellers on there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm looking at in this is that the other sellers are completely priced out of market, and that's probably because the company themselves is selling it at a price that they can't make money on. So
Yeah, I mean, this guy's only got 40 units.
So we got a couple.
I mean, this guy might be buying direct.
Yeah.
He's got 600 units.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I don't love this. I mean, let's look at the listing. Yeah, I mean, the listing's not good, but I don't know. My initial thoughts on this. I don't know if you agree with that. I would stay away from it. It's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably do the same, and we're both probably thinking the same thing, which is that, the brand's getting 100% of the sales right now. It's like, even if you could come in and they're getting it at full margin, so they're not selling wholesale. They obviously ship into Amazon, so they have their logistics system set up. So, I mean, we're struggling here to find like a real value add that we can bring to the table. Because if they're making full margin dollars already, and I mean, the product sells very well, they don't have any issues with MAP violations or anything. Yeah, the listing could be improved, but like, where's the strategic advantage? Like, why would this brand consciously make less money by selling to us versus selling themselves on Amazon in this case, right?
The only thing that you would, I would look at is if they're having a logistical issue in terms of getting the products in, and if you see stockouts, if you see things like that. I mean, we've talked to brands and convinced brands to go from selling third party to selling through us as a representative for them, just on the basis of they can't handle the logistics. But that doesn't look to be an issue with them. So again, I don't think that the value add that we would provide is enough for them to get out of what they're doing, because it's a tough situation when the brand is selling direct and they seem like they have their systems down. I mean, could we improve the listings? Could we do things? Definitely. But in that, I think the barrier to entry is too high on listings like this, especially because it's a product also selling at $9.69. It's not, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a 3-pack too, so you question even if that could be profitable. So we'll skip over that and we'll just keep going here.
Great category though. I mean, anything grocery and gourmet, anything non-returnable is great. If you guys have any questions relating to anything that's not sourcing, just anything Amazon related, feel free to drop them in here and we will get to those as well in the midst of doing this. That looked like an interesting product. Powdered goat milk.
Yeah, they're a big brand.
Are they?
Yeah, I didn't recognize the name until I saw the image.
You're up on the powdered goat milk industry?
That's right. No, I've seen it in the store before. And that's another good indicator is, if you're used to seeing some of these brands, or you've seen them on the shelves in the stores, right? Chances are it's probably a brand that has a large enough brand equity to actually be in that brick and mortar store, which means that they probably got their shit together on Amazon,
Right.
Or it's just a massive brand and you can't build a connection with the brand owner, or an executive decision maker. So it's like this one caught my eye for some reason. Grocery tea that's light, it's easy to ship, nice selling price, doing almost 120K a month. I mean, what's their brand score? It's only a 4. So it's like these are the preliminary assessments that we do when we look at something like this, and we look and we see that there's 6 sellers on this listing, 6 here, 2 here. So I mean,
ceremonial grade matcha. This is a tea, though. What does that mean?
What's that?
Suppressed buy box. That's another thing. No, I just said it's a ceremonial grade. I don't know what. I guess I don't know anything about it. But right off the rip, I mean, the listing looks terrible in terms of, which is good for our purposes.
Look at this. Yeah. I mean, this is a good one, I think. I mean, and why don't we just walk people through why we're saying this is a good one?
Yeah, can you, before we even do that, can you just go down to the Keepa and go zoom out a little bit more? I just want to see what that all time looks like. Yeah, so I mean, it really just started picking up this year. I mean, which obviously, and this is a very, it seems like an obvious point, but if we look at in like 2022, look how many sellers were on there, for example, 6, right? And now as soon as the rank, here we go, starts going, and now we dropped into a 4-digit rank, and now we've got 28 sellers. So, as the product, and that's a big thing to use as a value add with brands and a value prop is brands, products start doing better, and everyone tries to sell it. And so coming in as a seller who the product maybe isn't doing so great, it's doing well, which is why you want to target it, obviously, but it's not doing so great, and it's starting to clean up the listing, do these other things, and then all these other sellers will try to jump on the listing and try to sell the product, and the brands get scared away a lot of the times because they're thinking that they're missing out on opportunity. And we always bring up the point that, what's the saying, like, if he wanted to, he would, right? Like, as far as they would have reached out before if they actually had a vested interest in the brand. So that's a good point to remember as well. But back to what you're saying, for why this is a good listing for us, meaning that it's a bad listing, just has to do with the things that the brand score takes into account, which is the brand store, the pictures, the A+ content or lack thereof, the price fluctuations, the amount of sellers, everything like that has to do with why we're looking at this saying it's a good listing. So bad representation, good sales volume. And when we see that combination, it makes us more inclined to want to contact the brand and find opportunity in that listing.
For some reason, your audio is kind of going in and out a little bit. You just check on that. But going off of that, this is great because it's checking every box for me, right? We know the bases, like the basic stuff is covered, right? No images. You got literally one image. You have title not optimized, 0 bullet points. You got competitors running ads on their page. You have no A+ content, which takes place down in the product description, or lack thereof. I'm not even seeing any sort of product description. But it's lacking all of those things. And then just a brand store, but then to throw fuel on the fire, it's like you look at the Keepa chart and they just have a complete mess, right? Like their pricing structure is just all over the place. Their resellers, as Brandon pointed out, was at 38 at one point and is now at like nobody. And the reason for that is because they don't have a dedicated partner that's, they're in communication with to be ordering on a frequent basis to, one, ensure product availability, and, the two, just to have that ratio in a 1-to-1 rate, from the reseller that's purchasing from them versus what's selling on Amazon. So a lot of times when we start working with brands will see an increase in sales because they perhaps were not getting all the sales before with all these different distributors on Amazon, right? So there's a number of factors here that are just blaring, to contact this brand, and that's exactly what we would do. So why don't we go ahead and transition it to, our traditional second part of this live, which is we've identified a brand. We've talked about why it's a prospect and worth pursuing. Now, how do we position? What do we say? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so all of the initial calls start the same, but the key element to it is that we want to be prepared and we want to go in with the information to figure out and face rejection and face any sort of objections that the brand might have. So we're able to do that in a matter of seconds, basically, from looking at this listing. And we might even take a look at the other listings of the brand as well to see if it's all consistent. But we obviously want to get their information. We want to give them a call. And in a brand like this, I would definitely call them. Sometimes I'll say email first, depending on if it's a low priority. But calling them allows them to have some tonality and explain different things. And even if we're not accepting Amazon sellers, which it most likely will be, you can prod and kind of explore as to why that is the case, and then use this listing as ammunition for why they should reconsider. And we even send pictures and screenshots of the listings with information as well in the emails. So
right. Yeah, so we will start with, and when we get hit with that, we're not working with Amazon sellers. Brandon talked about the tonality, so we are gauging that tonality, right? And then we're strategically positioning based on what they say. So it really, people, a lot of times
we go, okay, and then we hang on.
Yeah, that's how we've closed our best accounts. We say thank you, goodbye.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing that though.
Right. Well, this is why I say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I think one of the biggest hurdles as a new seller is like, what do you say next when they say, no, we're not interested? Well, when in doubt, just ask why. Like if you can't find any words to say, you don't know what to say, just ask why. We've gotten to a point now where we like if we're met with resistance, we are probably happier than if they were just like, yeah, take the account. Because if they're like, yeah, take the account, that shows they have no semblance of control whatsoever, and they really don't care. So it might actually be harder to convince, a long-term exclusivity or selective agreement with somebody that just doesn't care versus somebody that's in the process of cleaning it up. And that's where we want to hit them, right? We don't want to hit them, not that we don't want to, but the best time to hit them is when they start thinking about these things, when they recognize the problem, they know it's an issue, and we can come in right at that point and provide strategic solutions, right? We don't want to do it after the fact when they're already working with a partner. We've been there before. And I mean, yeah, you can do it preemptively and start to mold their opinion around their brand on Amazon. You can absolutely do that. But when you could hit them right in that timing, it's like, I mean, that's where we've gotten our best accounts,
Yeah. And sometimes that's all it is. Like the brand has to be ready to move, and you can kind of sway and convince them over time and provide correct information and prove to them that your information that you're providing them with is correct, and kind of sway their opinion over time with that. But sometimes, the saying, strike while the iron's hot. Sometimes it's just the iron's hot and you just got to make a move at that point.
Yeah, and that's sales. That's sales in general. So John's got a question about shipping cost. How do you estimate shipping cost?
So we do it based on per pound. I mean, what do we say anywhere between 50 to maybe 60 cents per pound? You say that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think it's fair to say if you're shipping small parcel, which you most likely are if you're a new seller, you're not shipping LTL, you're probably looking at about 50 cents a pound. And that's, I think, 50, 60 cents is conservative. Like most of our products will end up being under that. Occasionally we'll get a product that's above it. But that's probably a good estimator to use. And so you're better off going conservative, right? And overestimating your shipping
exactly.
costs.
So so you jump into the revenue calculator and put in the ASIN, and then at the top there will be a weight of the product based on the listing. So hypothetically, let's say that the product weighs 1.43 pounds. 1.43 times 0.5 for 50 cents a pound, and you're looking at 71.5 cents estimated shipping. So, and obviously, it's not a solid thing. It varies depending on if you're shipping LTL, it's totally different, but that's generally speaking. We work that into our buy cost. So we say, when purchasing the product, we don't want to ignore the shipping to us. We don't want to ignore the shipping to Amazon because it all adds up to the profitability of a SKU to SKU and the ASIN to ASIN.
Yeah, and that's your gross margin, right? So like depending on how much overhead you have thereafter will determine your net margin. If you have a warehouse, employees, software expenses, utility expenses, insurance, all those different fixed costs that are operate regardless of the volume that you do in your business, those are your overhead expenses. So when we talk about the shipping costs, we're factoring that in on the gross margin level. So we want to make sure that at the gross margin, at the bottom gross margin, we're looking at and accounting for not just our cost of goods sold, but our Amazon fees, but our shipping costs, both from the brand or distributor to us, and our shipping costs into Amazon. And then after all of that is what you're left with on your gross. And then you take off your net, which varies from business to business depending on the size. So I hope that answered the question, John. And, as always, if you guys have any other questions or comments, drop them in, and so that's really, the focal point of this live is to do exactly that, every week. We couldn't go live on Instagram this week, but, we do this live every week. We go live every Wednesday, 7:00, and we do our sourcing processes. We show you how we source. And when we source, we're not just sourcing through Smart Scout, right? Smart Scout is where it begins, because once you find this listing, right, and I could jump back to that listing, but that listing that we had up had right now only 2 sellers. But on the Keepa chart, you can see 28 plus sellers with stores that you can potentially source more product from. So when we talk about finding brands, it's all in the storefronts. It's just storefront stalking, and they're there. And the more you go down that rabbit hole, how many times do we look at brands every single day that are doing multi-6 figures on Amazon that, it's like even in your day-to-day work, you come across something and you're like, wow, like I need to write this down and contact them.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about it last night, after the workday, just the opportunity on it is crazy. Like, I think you start to, as you become better at pinpointing these brands and finding opportunity and seeing what an opportunity is, you start to realize how much of it there is. We were looking at a brand last night together that was a maybe $15 average sell price, that when we were estimating and calculating it out, it was $120,000 in profit a year. And that is a drop in the bucket as far as the opportunity that's on Amazon.
As an exclusive.
So,
right? As an exclusive.
As an exclusive. Yeah, exactly. And so, and the more that you do this, the more that we were saying, you realize that how many 6-figure profit brands there are. And you put that in perspective of, yes, the business has expenses. We have much more expenses than a normal job. But at the same time, that when you look at it as a salary, because hypothetically, if you have an exclusive, you could do nothing else and, capitalize on that product, and you're making, in that case, that one product is over double what the average salary is in America. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. And that's, again, just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. I think as a beginner, the biggest concern is finding the suppliers and just, understanding that it's not oversaturated, and that there is so many brands out there. Like if I spent every minute sourcing for the rest of my life, I wouldn't cover a fraction of the brands that are out there on Amazon. Like, there are so many brands. Every single day we're both presented with new opportunities. And it's like, sometimes you hang on to things that maybe are not working or are not so profitable just because you have them. But the reality is that there is so much opportunity out there. You need to go out and find it. You need to source it, and you need to get out of your comfort zone. And that means cold calling, right? Cold calling 100 to 150 brands a week. And better yet, if you can, go out and meet them. Next week, I'm going to be at a conference meeting a brand. The following week, we're both going to be at another conference and office meeting a brand. So it's like, we've gotten our business to a point where it's like, we know our system works for these brands. We know it flat out, right? Because we have testimonials, we have all these things. So it's like the snowball, when I say the snowball keeps accumulating, I mean, when you reach a certain point, it just starts getting so aggressive and big, that snowball, that it's just like tumbling down the hill, ready to just like eat everybody up. It's crazy. It's literally crazy, the amount of opportunity that's out there and the opportunity to scale in this business.
It's an interesting analogy, but it's tumbling down the hill, ready to eat everybody up.
It's exactly what it's doing.
I guess so. All right, we'll go with that.
So that's what we're saying, is that as a new seller, it's very challenging to see and have that foresight, but you have to just literally do the inputs. I mean, that's when we first started. I started doing wholesale. I said, I'm going to do this for 3 months, right? And after 3 months, I'm going to contact 100 to 150 brands a week. And after 3 months, I'm going to make an assessment of if this business model is legit or if everybody's just BSing it on social media, right? And then I realized it was legit because I actually started, accumulating brands and getting some accounts with distributors and brands. And it was like, this is working. So we're just going to double down on it and just keep piling it on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the hardest part, is the beginning, is like to get over that hurdle of realizing that there's going to be a lot of upfront work without a lot of reward. But the thing is, once you start to see that reward, chances are you also got another 10 brands in the pipeline, where just because one is taking 6 months, I'm talking like exclusive, talk brands, where one's taking, you're working with a brand for a year, but you've also been working with 3 other brands for a year, 10 other brands for a year. And so you start to, I think it starts to become less delayed gratification, because you got so many irons in the fire that you're just constantly funneling through brands, and you're in a different position with every brand. I mean, every single brand that we talk to, we're in a different position in terms of where we're at, what their mindset is, because you're dealing with people. This is a people-related business. And so I think that the delayed gratification is the hardest at the beginning. And I think as you do this more and more, it starts to become easier in terms of you're not waiting so long before you close your next account, if you're consistently reaching out.
Yeah. You got to be doing the inputs. And as we're about to close out here, like a lot of arbitrage sellers consider going into wholesale. A lot of new sellers with no experience on Amazon consider going into wholesale. And either path is fine, right? Generally, we say start in arbitrage, learn the logistics, low amount of capital. But if you want to jump into wholesale, that can be very much so done. The reality is, though, that wholesale, like Brandon pointed out, it does require relationship building. It requires you to talk to people. It requires you to, get out of your comfort zone and be persistent, have grit, and will be willing to take no for an answer. So like if you meet those characteristics as a person, or you believe you can, not everybody's, a born salesperson. I mean, I'm not a natural born salesperson. Neither of us are really natural born salespersons. So it's like, but if you can take the model and run with it, right, and learn to become good at these things, I mean, you could just crush it. And different business models have different personalities. Some people are the people that just want to scan product and, be behind a screen and sort of, assess what's profitable where, and almost like act as if you're running a treasure hunt. And that's fine, right? But with wholesale, it requires you to get out there, get on the phone, have tonality, and really be persistent in pitching with these brands. And, I mean, that it's not taking no for an answer. I mean, if I had to put it down to one thing.
Yeah. But it's not as scary as most people think. That's the message that I kind of want to leave everyone with, is that it is not as intimidating or as scary as it's meant out to be. And that's one of the things that we hear, most of the time from arbitrage sellers who are trying to get into wholesale is saying, I don't understand, I don't know how, it's complicated, it's intimidating. And we're here to tell you that it's really not that bad. Once you start, it's not as scary or as intimidating as I think the industry makes it out to be. So
at the end of the day, it's all arbitrage, really. I mean, we're buying low and selling high if you strip it down at its core. There's a lot of other stuff in between, but wholesale has been operating since Stone Ages, So with that, we'll leave it. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, just hit that like button, support the channel, really helps us out, helps us make more videos, helps us do these lives every week. So we really appreciate that. We'll be resuming next Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern, as always, live Twitter. Next time will be Instagram, barring any technical difficulties, and YouTube as always. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.